Well, that was wonderful.
Amen.
Well, powerful message.
Yes.
I have one for you today, too. Although I can't sing, and I'm not going to try. I don't want to run everybody out of the building. It would be like somebody yelling fire, and out the door. No, today we're going to go into Daniel again, chapter 5, which I call the God of justice and judgment. But let's take a quick step back. And in chapter 1, when Daniel was taken by Nebuchadnezzar, he and his friends, to Babylon, we found that we have a God who takes defeat and changes it into victory. In the second chapter, we found him to be the revealer of secrets when he brought the dream to Nebuchadnezzar, the statue, with a head of gold, the chest and arms of silver, the waist of brass, legs of iron, and the feet of iron and clay. And Daniel was the only one who not only could tell Nebuchadnezzar what his dream was, but what it meant. And that was God's will, using Daniel as his tool. In chapter 3, he's the redeemer of his people when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who had purposed in their hearts, as Daniel did, to serve only the Lord, would not bow down to the golden idol that Nebuchadnezzar had placed. And he had them thrown into a fiery furnace heated 7 times hotter. And yet, the only thing that the fire consumed, besides the guards that threw them in, were the bonds that held them. Chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar's had another dream, the dream of the great tree. And again, Daniel is the only one who can give it the interpretation. But he proves himself to be the ruler of kings because he lets Nebuchadnezzar know that if he doesn't change his ways, he will have to face the consequences. But we also find he's a God of patience. He gives him a year, but even in that year, he does not change. So he ends up for 7 years out in the wilderness before he finally realizes the greatness of the Lord. This proves him to be the ruler of kings. So now we come to chapter 5. And if you take your Bibles, open to Daniel chapter 5. Before we actually begin, I want you to close your eyes and remember when you were a young child and you had a vivid imagination. You could travel anywhere in the world by simply closing your eyes. Well, we're going to travel back in time, 2,500 years, to Babylon. Mid-evening, stars are out, the moon is shining. There is some concern because the Medo-Persian army is surrounding the city. But everyone believes there's no way anyone could defeat those walls. I mean, they're 100 feet high. The walls are wide enough that 2 chariots can run side by side. They have the great gates. They have stores of food. And they have the Euphrates River running through the middle of the city. What have they got to be concerned about? Belshazzar the king made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in the presence of the thousands. While he tasted the wine, Belshazzar gave the command to bring the gold and the silver vessels, which his father, Nebuchadnezzar, had taken from the temple, which had been in Jerusalem, that the king and his lords, his wives, his concubines might drink wine from them. Then they brought the gold vessels that had been taken from the temple of the house of God, which had been in Jerusalem, and the king and his lords, his wives, his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Now, I don't know about you, but that tells me that he has just crossed the line. God has drawn a line in the sand, this far, no further. And he not only stepped over it, he leaped over it. He has taken the sacred vessels from the temple and is drinking wine in a debacle of heart. I mean, there's things that you don't even want to think about going on all over the place in that banquet hall. You figure there's 1,000 of these well-dressed lords that drinking the wine. They've got their wives and their concubines or whatever. There's things going on all over the place. This is a defiant act. Belshazzar knows the history of his predecessors. He knows, at least somewhere in the back of his mind, that God is not someone to be trifled with, that he's already half blasted anyway. They say an individual who's a great eater and a great drinker is probably not very good at anything else, which is probably true, because this is the only time Belshazzar's ever mentioned, and he hasn't got much time left anyway. As we'll see soon, this is Babylon's last night. There's a last night for everything and everybody. There's a last drink. There's a last meal. There are nothing that lasts in the temporal world. But there are nothing but beginnings in God's world. Amen. As he was watching, drinking, carousing, in that same hour, verse 5, the fingers of a man's hand appeared and wrote opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw that part of the hand as it wrote. But imagine when you just see only a hand, a bloodless hand writing on the wall. You know, where are the Ghostbusters when you need them? Well, they haven't gotten here yet. Then the king's countenance changed. His thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his hips were loosened and his knees knocked against each other. Now imagine the situation here. He sees the writing on the wall. And I don't know how many of you know a state of absolute panic. He knows absolute panic. You know, your head starts pounding. Your stomach kind of gets into knots. You know, you're looking for the Excedrin or the Pepto-Bismol because it's getting bad, right? The knees are knocking, getting a little weak. You know, the hands are trembling. Because he's beginning to realize he's made a serious mistake. Countenance changes, face goes white. I mean, when you see something scary, what happens, right? What happens to your face? You know, the muscles tighten up. You might suddenly take a sudden breath, but you lose the blood out of your face. Your thoughts become troubled. Stomach gets knotted up. The knees are not. You know, he's in panic mode. So the king spoke, saying, "Bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, the soothsayers." The king spoke, saying to the wise men of Babylon, "Whoever reads this writing tells me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck, and he shall be third ruler in the kingdom." Now, doesn't this sound familiar? Calling in quote-unquote wise men, astrologers, Chaldeans, or the great learned ones, the magicians, the psychics, you know. What did Nebuchadnezzar do with his first dream? He called in these same guys. Only the first time, he was a little bit smarter than they were because he's saying, you know, I don't really trust these guys. So, okay, you tell me what I dreamed and tell me what it means. Well, they couldn't tell him what he dreamed, so they certainly couldn't tell him what it meant. But Daniel asked for God's help, and God revealed the dream to him and what it meant. The second time, the dream with the great tree calls these guys in again. Same problem. They can't tell him what it means, but at least this time they knew what the dream was. Daniel's brought in again. Full interpretation of what the dream means. He didn't eat it right away. So he ended up out in the wilderness. Astrologers, these psychic phenomenon things, you know, that's nothing but false science, if you even want to classify it as a science. But yet there are people out there, especially in the area of astrology, that live their lives by the stars. And you see it in the grocery stores every day. If you go into Publix, you go into Winn-Dixie, you go through the checkout line. What's right there? The tabloids. You know, they're going to tell you all the dirt on everybody. But they also have these big astrology sections. You know, you can find out what day is good for you to do this, what day is bad for you to do that. I remember an incident with a young lady who lived her life by astrology. And she read one that said, today would not be a good day for you to go out of your house. Okay. There's only one problem. Her house caught fire. So now she's in a burning house. The fire department is there trying to get her out. And she's fighting with the firemen because she's so afraid to go out of the house. When I think she must have been reading the wrong day, because surely it would have told her it's the wrong day to stay in your house. Magicians use different techniques to try to read the future, at least back then. What are magicians now? They're entertainers. We know everything they do is an illusion. Of course, now they don't have to use just mirrors. They've got all the new technologies that they can throw at you and make airplanes disappear, make elephants disappear, make the Statue of Liberty disappear. They didn't really disappear, but you think they did. And of course, don't get me started on psychics. Can anyone other than the Lord know what's going to happen tomorrow? Because He knows what's going to happen next week, next month, next year, next century. Of course, He knew that when He spoke and created the universe. But they making the same mistake again. Now, Belshazzar had to know that his grandfather, although in the Bible they do usually refer to him as father of Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar. But in the Bible we know that that's not always true. Jesus was considered a son of David, even though David lived about 1,000 years beforehand. So in Bible terminology, we're thinking of descended from. Of course, Jesus wasn't actually a son of David because he was a son of God, but his adopted father, Joseph, was a son of David. So that's just a little bit of minor trivia for you. Now there's another section here that we're going to look at because obviously these guys come in and they can't interpret what's on the wall. They have no clue. Now these wise men, they couldn't read the writing. So the king, greatly troubled, still has, kind of ashen face. Then the queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet hall. And the queen spoke, saying, O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts trouble you, nor your countenance change. There is a man in your kingdom in who is the Spirit of the Holy God. And in the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father, made him chief of the magicians, the astrologers, Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. Inasmuch as the excellent spirit, knowledge, understanding, interpreting dreams, solving riddles, and explaining enigmas were found in Daniel, whom the king named Belshazzar. Now, let Daniel be called, and he will give the interpretation. Now, when we think of the queen, in some interpretations, in some translations of the Bible, she's not actually the queen, but might be what you call the queen mother. Nebuchadnezzar was Nebuchadnezzar's father. The queen that they're referring to here was actually one of Nebuchadnezzar's daughters, who married another king named Nabonidus. Belshazzar is their son. So actually Nebuchadnezzar is, quote, the grandfather, if you figure in regular genealogy here. So the queen mother comes in because Sonny Boy is having some issues and says, remember that when your grandfather had problems and the wise guys couldn't tell him anything, he called Daniel. So let's bring Daniel in. Well, Daniel by now is 80 years old. Over 80 years old, actually. He's been an elder statesman now in Babylon for close to 70 years. He has a good reputation. He has an excellent spirit. He has great knowledge and understanding. He can interpret dreams. He solves problems, doubts. But more importantly, he's faithful to God. When he was first taken prisoner, he and his friends had purposed in their hearts that they would only serve God. And God, through their entire time in Babylon, was with him. Now, we can take a lesson from this. For 70 years, God protected Daniel and was with Daniel in a heathen, idolatrous state, if you will, and kept him pure, kept him honest, kept him strong, kept him faithful. We have to have the same kind of strength of character that Daniel did. And I know, I've heard it, God wouldn't be with me where I work. You wouldn't believe some of the things that go on where I work. The off-color jokes, and shall we say the less than appropriate pictures that might be hanging in different places. If God can be with Daniel in Babylon, God can be with you where you work. Amen. Maybe your home life isn't all that great because for whatever reason, you wouldn't know about, music my kids listen to, or things my wife or my husband say, the language that they use. God can be with you in your home, just like he was with Daniel in Babylon. You may say, well, I'm a businessman, Sometimes we can't always be truthful in our dealings. And I say that's dead wrong. If God can be with Daniel in Babylon, God can be with you you're a businessman.
Amen.
Politicians. Oh, God wouldn't be with me. I'm a politician, you know. I lie, I cheat, I steal. When I'm not kissing babies, I'm stealing their lollipops. No, no. Honest politicians do exist. There are just not very many of them out there. And they sometimes, you know, when they start, they've got the right idea. They've got the right track. They're going to go in, they're going to do the right thing for the people. Problem is, when they get into that environment with other politicians who have already strayed, they think, well, you know, it's awful hard to do it the right way. I mean, if I just kind of cheat a little bit over here, I can make progress. And that's the first step down the wrong road. Daniel was brought in to the king, verse 13. The king spoke and said to Daniel, I've heard of you. Aren't you that Jew that was taken prisoner by my grandfather? What an insult that to most people. Are you the Daniel, the one captured from Judah, whom my father the king brought from Judea? I've heard of you. The Spirit of God is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now, these wise men and astrologers have been brought before me. They couldn't read the writing. They can't make it known to me. Now, if you can read the writing and make known its interpretation, you shall be clothed in purple, have a chain of gold around your neck, and be the third ruler in the kingdom. Now, come on. Do you think he's going to be able to bribe Daniel by making him third ruler? He was second ruler under Nebuchadnezzar. I mean, come on, guys. Third ruler. Why would I want to be third ruler? I was second ruler before you were born. When little Belsh, she was a little kid, he was bouncing him on his knee. But Daniel, not just because of the fact that he had been second ruler, I mean, after all, while Nebuchadnezzar was out for 7 years eating grass like oxen, who do you think was keeping Babylon going? Only one person, Daniel. With his intellect, that's what was holding that whole place together until Nebuchadnezzar realized the glory of the Lord and admitted it and had his human heart returned to him and was able to be placed back on his throne. Daniel had a very cryptic response. He answered and said, "Give your rewards to another. I don't want them. Give your gifts to thyself and your rewards to another." And yet, he will still interpret the writing on the wall. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. Besides, when he walked in there and saw what was written on the wall, he already knew what was about to happen. You have a majority of the lords in one place, already half drunk, including Belshazzar himself. The Medo-Persian army has already made their plans to get into the city. And if we look back in Isaiah and Jeremiah, they describe it in detail. Remember, Bible prophecy doesn't guess. Bible prophecy doesn't speculate. Bible prophecy knows. Why? Because it's from God.
Amen. Amen.
For many years, the book of Daniel was misunderstood, disregarded by a number of different Christian scholars because they thought, well, it was probably written after all this happened, but come to find out, the new discipline of biblical archaeology was proving everything in Daniel to be an absolute fact and in proper sequence, in the right time frame. And then they turn around and said, not yet, it had to have been done later, it's too accurate. How can it be too accurate when it comes from God? If we look at the Cyrus cylinder, which is currently in the London Museum of Natural History, it gives an exact detail of everything that happened during that campaign with the Medo-Persians against Babylon, including how they dug a reservoir, diverted the river, allowing the forces to go down the riverbed, under the main gate, and as Isaiah had written earlier, the inner gates were left open. So they just walked right through. They didn't have to fight anybody. But they knew where everybody was. All they had to do was listen. Okay. O King, the Most High God, gave Nebuchadnezzar your father a kingdom, majesty, glory, and honor. And because of the majesty that he gave him, all peoples, nations, languages trembled and feared before him. Whomever he wished, he executed. Whoever he wished, he kept alive. Whomever he wished, he set up. Whomever he wished, he put down. But when his heart was filled up and his spirit was hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. Then he was driven from the sons of man, his heart made like a beast, his dwelling was in the wild, with the wild donkeys, they fed him with grass like oxen, his body was wet with dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men, and appoints over it whomever he chooses. But you, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, although you knew all this. Just like his mother, the Queen Mother, she would have known everything that her father had gone through. And quite probably, Belshazzar did also. But he's very short-sighted. Here is this majestic individual, 85 years old, but still in good health, still vital. Here's a 36, 35-year-old, I'm not going to use the term I was thinking, but this individual is kind of a wet behind the ears type, okay? He thinks he's hot stuff when he's little more than a flash in the pan. You have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. They have brought the vessels of his house before you and your lords, your wives, your concubines, have drunk wine from them, and you have praised the gods of silver, gold, bronze, iron, wood, stone, which do not see or hear or know. And the God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways, you have not glorified. Then the fingers of the hand were sent from him, and the writing was written. And this is the inscription that was written. Okay. God was someone that Daniel only wanted to please. That was his whole goal in life. Belteshazzar's problem is that he knew but did not do. In other words, he knew about God's glory. He knew about God's grace, but he didn't do anything about it. He did not glorify God. He did not accept God because he had an I problem. You know what that is? I did this. I did that. It was Nebuchadnezzar's statement that Babylon, the great glorious city that I made. As soon as he uttered those words, that's when he was driven out to spend 7 years eating grass before he finally acknowledged the grace of God. Now you've got the grandson who knew but did not do because he also has an I problem. I am the king. I can do what I want. And guess what? When you were a kid, didn't you think, I can do what I want? And what did your parents say?
Nope.
Want to bet? You do what I tell you to do and you don't like it. Because there was a reason. We don't want our children to get hurt. We want our children to be safe. So we try to set boundaries for them to keep them safe. God has set boundaries for us to keep us safe.
Amen.
Belshazzar had crossed the line. He had committed one of the greatest sacrileges you could possibly do by taking the holy vessels from the temple in Jerusalem and drank wine from them. Not just him, but his concubines, his wives, his other lords. A sacrilege that could not be accepted. He knew what was right, but did not do what was right. So now Daniel is going to explain to him the writing. Manny, this is the interpretation. Manny Tekel Pettis. God has numbered your days of your kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighty in the balances and found wanting. Pettis, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Now, Ellen G. White has written in The Great Controversy, while the man of business is absorbed in the pursuit of gain, while the pleasure lover is seeking indulgence, while the daughter of fashion is arranging her adornments, it may be that the hour of judgment for all the earth will pronounce the sentence, thou art weighed in the balance and found wanting. Remember, we don't know when the final day comes. So we can't say, well, give me one more day, give me an hour. When he's coming, he's going to come. And it doesn't matter what you're in the process of doing. You can't say, can you hold on a minute? I'm not quite ready yet. That's not going to fly. Belshazzar gave the command, and they clothed Daniel with purple and put a gold chain around his neck, made a proclamation concerning that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. Ellen G. Bright also writes, in that last night of mad folly, Belshazzar and his lords had filled up the measure of their guilt and the guilt of the Chaldean kingdom. No longer was God's restraining hand ward off the impending evil. Through manifold provinces, God had sought to teach them reverence for his law. He would have healed Babylon. he declared those judgment was now reaching unto heaven, but she was not healed. This was Jeremiah 51:9. At that point in time, the doors burst open. The Persian army had been moving through the streets, their swords shining and sparkling in the starry and moonlit night. And imagine the reaction in that banquet hall. It was a bloodbath, to say nothing else. There wasn't a single person that left that ballroom alive that night, with the exception of Daniel. Darius spared his life because he saw the glow in him that came from God. That very night, Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, was slain, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, at that time being 62 years old. He had been warned on more than one occasion. We can't be caught in a situation where they can say that we knew, but we did not do. This is one of the most popular, most read, most published books in the world. There is no excuse for not having one of these. We know because we read the Bible. So that means that we must do. Am I right?
Amen.
We know, so we must do. Because when the final judgment comes, we can't say we didn't know and use that as an excuse for not doing it. Let's pray. Dear Lord, you have given us your word. You have given us this map, this guide, this way. We know, but we can't do it alone. We pray that you will be with us so that we know and we will do. We ask this in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.